story is a component of fighting games that, to this day, does not get the respect it deserves. I still get comments from people saying that it's silly to care because the story doesn't matter. But it does. It always has. From King of Fighters going well beyond what was expected in its day, to Mortal Kombat popularising the cinematic story mode format, to even something as small as a rival battle or a unique intro animation, fighting games embrace story, be it through a fleshed out plot or just well conveyed characters. If your main ever got their moveset reworked in a big way and you stuck with them, or you were excited to see them kicking ass on the big screen or in a non-fighting game, you care about the character for reasons beyond gameplay. You care about the story. If the story didn't matter, we wouldn't see so many adaptations of these IPs, with so much passion put into fleshing out existing plots or telling new ones with these beloved characters. People aren't excited to see these characters pop up in Fortnite or other non-fighters because they're excited to see Chun-Li's moveset that won't be a part of the collaboration. They're excited to see Chun-Li in this other thing because they like Chun-Li the person. And fighting games nowadays put so much time and money and effort into the presentation of their stories, often marketing the games more with the narrative of the title than the new mechanics. Just because it's not the #1 priority doesn't mean it doesn't matter. And that's what we are here to talk about today. To celebrate Mortal Kombat's newest expansion releasing, I have gathered a selection of creators from across the fighting game space and a few others who are passionate about fighting games, even if they don't talk about them all that much, to discuss some of our favourite moments from fighting game stories, be it from the games themselves or from the myriad adaptations, to show how much these plots and characters and settings matter to us. So enough yammering from me for now. Oh god, that's cringe. Let's get to our first gracious guest and hear why they think story in fighting games matters.
I always felt like the first 4 mainline Tekken games had by far the best story of any fighting game.
At the time, the status quo kept changing around who the main villain or hero was and what was at stake. I especially felt this with Tekken 4. Kazuya was back, which at the time I thought was pretty mind-blowing. This was a period though when if a character died, they stayed dead for quite a bit and didn't return as DLC some months later. The plot was grounded with more fantastical points such as Devil and Ogre removed from the game. Not saying I don't like those elements, but it can be refreshing to take a break and have more personal stories every now and then. Beyond the Mishimas, this was a game where we really got to learn more about and take the rest of the cast seriously. Paul and Law became broke, and this was done in a more heavy manner versus how it's done now. Kuma, who's usually more of a jokey character, went back to his animal roots to best his rival Paul. Yoshimitsu started his rivalry with Brian as well, who Yoshimitsu had previously helped only to be betrayed. For me, the highlight was King, a character that I didn't care too much for until this game. Tekken 4 introduced newcomer Craig Murdoink, who killed King's master and mentor Armor King. The death itself wasn't shown beyond this one panel, and even the art here is blurred and obscured. A mournful King only joins the King of Iron Fist tournament to get revenge on Murdoink by taking his life as well. Usually, King's intentions of joining the tourney are much more noble. He fights for others that can't for themselves, fighting for orphans or for charity. Here, he's fighting only for himself and is blinded by revenge. He buys Murdoonk's way in the tournament so he can guarantee his presence, and canonically, King beats him and then immediately drops out of the tournament. His ending is my favorite in Tekken 4. He goes to the hospital to kill Murdoink, who's still unconscious from their prior fight. King raises his fist to finish him, and even without music and dialogue, you can see his internal struggle. Despite King being dressed as a cowboy cat, the seriousness of the scene is executed with such care and attention. He throws the photo of Craig's family on his chest, perhaps in the hope that when Craig wakes up, he remembers what's most important to him and gains some humility from this defeat, which we know he doesn't since in Tekken 5 he wants a rematch of King. Normally I'd find this hokey if it weren't for them becoming friends at the end. Tekken 4 was a bit darker than the previous entries, and I wish Namco would go back to this story style. Tekken 5 is great, but in terms of plot, they play it safe quite a bit. Some characters have not evolved past the plot threads that were created in Tekken 4. Paul and Law are still two broke bitches, and Steve and Nina's relationship has barely changed.
In Tekken 4, the personal stakes for each character participating was huge, whereas in Tekken 5, it just felt like keeping the status quo. That's why Tekken 4 has my favorite moment out of any fighting game story.
There are a lot of fighting game stories that hold significance within the gaming community. From high-stakes tournaments, rough street brawls, fantasy adventure, and whatever the hell's happening in Guilty Gear. But for me, I'm gonna take the high road and talk about a game that rarely comes up in these discussions despite the game's many kudos for its story mode. There are a lot of storytelling elements in the Def Jam series that tend to go unappreciated. Take for instance, Sticky Fingers.
Say something now! Come on! Say something now!
The rival turned nemesis and the penultimate challenge of the story mode in Fight for New York. Throughout the story mode, Sticky has positioned himself as someone who didn't like, trust, or respected the player character, being especially spiteful towards your successes, culminating into a one-on-one death match in a ring of fire, which overall might seem a bit jarring considering how his character was built up throughout the story, but the emotion and intensity displayed in this scenario forces us to recontextualize everything we know about Sticky throughout the entire story. For instance, way back in the beginning, we must ask the question, why was Sticky the only crew member who did not warm up to the player character even after proving their strength and skill in a fight? Well, given that D-Mob has taken an especial liking towards your character ever since you arrived, his unwavering doubt may suggest that he had to do a whole lot more than you to earn the crew's trust. On top of all that, you seem to be getting more preferential treatment. We also need to consider how he left the team. Sticky considers it a complete betrayal that he wasn't picked to represent D-Mob's crew and you were, highly suggesting that he put in a whole lot of work to be a part of this team. On top of all that, some new young blood who's done half the work is going to get that title. It seems that all Sticky wanted was some respect for all of his efforts that he put into joining the crew. And since he clearly wasn't getting that from D-Mob, he decided to join Crow out of vengeance. Not spite, vengeance. And the first thing we see him do while he's running with Crow is try to kill you in a drive-by. He wasn't the trigger man, but he definitely had a hand in planning all this out. Same can be said for the plan to blackmail you into working for Crow. After all, he's the one who gets to smack you around during the interrogation, and it all comes to a climax once we meet him again in the burning building, ready to take out all of his anger and rage on the person who stole his glory.
Now it's just you and me!
Now, as understandable as this motivation is, since D-Mob was clearly not resonating with his crew as much as he thought he was, Sticky was always going to be doing this one way or another. When everyone else in D-Mob's team was all about earning respect, Sticky was clearly just here to do gangster shit.
We go in here strapped and lay his ass out once and for all!
Wrong. We do that, and they're just gonna hit us back. What does that solve?
So we supposed to just roll over and let Crow piss in our backyard?
I mean, after he joins Crow, the first thing we see him do is the very thing that D-Mob told him not to do. For as much respect that he seemed to have wanted, he clearly wasn't giving as much as he should have, making him a rather interesting antithesis to the player character, resulting in one of the most epic final showdowns in not just fighting games, all of gaming. The only real downside to this scenario is that Sticky Fingers was probably the least appropriate character to use for this role, since he himself wasn't a character in the previous game. In a meta sense, Sticky is the new blood that is taking away the glory from established fighters from the previous roster, and the role of his character probably should have went to someone like Snowman, Pocket, or House. But you know what? Celebrity characters taking priority and continuity that doesn't make a whole lot of sense is par for the course for this franchise. Plus, Sticky Fingers' theme song is probably the most thematically appropriate song in this entire soundtrack.
I never leave a house door without that thing. If I gotta die, believe I'm going out in the...
Alright, Fourth Snake, so you want to know what fighting scene had some kind of significant, like, hit me in the feels kind of thing. So, you know, I could talk about any fighting game out there, but I think, you know, I'm going to talk about Mortal Kombat, obviously. There are so many different Mortal Kombat games out there, and, you know, I invested so much time into each one of them, but the one that really hit me hard for all the criticism that I give Mortal Kombat 11 has this one scene that just tied 30 years worth of lore together. And that is the ending of Mortal Kombat 11, known as the best ending. And it's known as the best ending because there are actually 3 different endings in the base game of Mortal Kombat 11. but this one in particular is the best one. It's the ending where Liu Kang acquires the hourglass and he goes to reset all of time and start all this timeline shenanigans that start up in Mortal Kombat 1, but he does it with Princess Kitana by his side. They kind of embrace each other as they begin to start the reset of everything. It's considered the best ending of Mortal Kombat 11 for a reason, because all the other Mortal Kombat 11 endings, you know, they had cool little things. You know, there's Shang Tsung getting the hourglass, there's Liu Kang going back to the Great Kung Lao, there's all these different things, but that particular ending, it had Liu Kang, the Chosen One, coming to his heroic conclusion. Not only had he merged souls with Raiden and become Fire God Liu Kang, but he has his happily ever after ending, which, you know, Mortal Kombat 1 kind of got rid of all that, but Mortal Kombat 11 did give him that moment of peace, and you walked away from that game with like a feeling of accomplishment, like these 30 years of lore had finally had their final chapter written. And to me, that is like, it hits you in the heartstrings. That's one of those scenes in a fighting game that makes you, you know, look back at everything that you've put into a franchise like this. It makes you look back at the movies, makes you look back at Mortal Kombat 9. It even goes back to the 2D era, and you consider the endings that you played whenever you first played Mortal Kombat in the arcade machines, and even Mortal Kombat 2. Like, you've been following this character in particular, not because he's your favorite character, but because he is the chosen one. He is the one who the games usually end up with. That's why Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance was such a big deal, because at the beginning of that one, Liu Kang dies, and you get zombie Liu Kang later on in the series and stuff like that. But this is the final chapter of Liu Kang's story. And so for me, Mortal Kombat 11, the best ending. Not any of the other two endings, not even Aftermath. I loved Aftermath, but Liu Kang and Kitana going to restart the timelines. That is the scene.
Wang Jindai is a kind of Master Roshi type pervy old man whose taste in women is questionable at the best of times and concerning at the worst of times. He's well over 100 years old. His face has more folds than a nutsack, and he has the dress sense of a jiangshi. His virility is disgusting, but respectable, and with ancient lechery comes wisdom, at least according to the Japanese. So it's perhaps predictable that the moment in fighting games that stands out to me, knowing how his story begins and knowing how it ends, is Wang Jindai telling Heihachi that power is not the same as strength.
真正的强者靠的不光是蛮力，如果不懂这一点，你是永远打不倒我的。
By taking two similar words which share synonymous meaning and forcing the player to consider the nuances between those two words, they create an entire dynamic and lens through which you can see the whole series. It provided context to Jin's revelation at the end of Tekken 4 and 8, and it gave definition to Kazuya's inherent character flaws. No, it gave the entire series' overarching trajectory. It gave Jin a way to self-destruct as a character and later on rebuild himself. It gave Jun a philosophical narrative purpose in opposition or aid to Kazuya, other than as a symbol of what was lost. It plays into the name of the series, which literally translates into Iron Fist. We see those who want power, those who have too much power, those who want strength, and those who have too little strength. It's a beautiful piece of writing, but more than that, it's an important moment in Jinrei's story itself. Jindai has received a letter from his long-lost friend Jinpachi, and has had to hurt people he cared about along the way to protect them from what lies ahead in the tournament. The revelation that he throws at Heihachi like it's second nature to refine immense wisdom into half a sentence is exactly before he kills his oldest friend, whose monstrosity consumed by a visible lust for power. And despite that sickeningly cruel fate, despite the pain of murdering a man he once loved enough to try and avenge him, Jinrei's lucid enough to provide comfort to Jinpachi on a deathbed which he reluctantly created for the man. This is an unfathomable adversity. He displays true strength until the very end, a living definition for the player of the difference between strength and power. Wang Jinrei lost so much. He had nothing but suffering, but despite that he showed strength by leaving the world a better place than it was left for him. I wish he could have returned for Tekken 8. Instead, he got replaced by a bigger, blacker Wang. Many of Leroy's lines would have felt more at home on the old Chinese man, but I guess I can be happy that he's around in spirit.
Of all the fighting games I've played, only one moment has stayed with me my entire life. The opening cinematic scene of Mortal Kombat Armageddon blew my mind as a kid. The way it starts off so moody and ominous, then escalates into full-on chaos was so hype! This scene features nearly the entire cast of characters from the game, and basically every fighter from every previous Mortal Kombat in one big, no-holds-barred free-for-all. While the initial explosion seems like pure chaos, it then starts to narrow focus down to a bunch of pairings of two individuals with rivalries in their respective storylines throughout the franchise thus far. Naturally, Scorpion vs. Sub-Zero, Shinnok vs. Raiden, Kung Lao vs. Baraka, then a completely random pairing of Jax and Quan Chi. Just as it seems like Shao Kahn is starting to get an advantage because he's a cheap-ass fighter with some broken moves and I still haven't beat MK3, Trap is sprung on our intrepid combatants. Whoa, Striker, take it easy! Then they start battling to see who can become King of the Mountain. Zombie Liu Kang was really freaky and cool, but I'm glad we didn't keep that as his permanent status quo. Well, I mean, it did kind of happen a second time, but that was different. As a kid, I always thought it was fun that Onaga got some revenge against Shao Kahn here, but then a few years later, I was just baffled how he made it back from this so quickly to be the one who beat Blaze. Because I'm a stickler for continuity, I was even more stoked in 2011 to see the first NetherRealm Mortal Kombat game follow up on this intro with all these characters in relatively the same positions after the fight, albeit in their outfits from the new game. This moment always stuck out to me as one of the most epic and exciting openings of a PS2 game, because how dire and long-reaching this was for the entire Mortal Kombat franchise, and because this was a celebration of every game that came before it. Never again will they be able to do a character roster where everyone gets to show up, and to this day we're still feeling the effects of this story event in every Mortal Kombat storyline that's come out since then. Shit was so broken they had to start over from scratch, and do that again eventually. And maybe another time.
BlazBlue Continuum Shift is the second game in the BlazBlue series. Within it is a fragmented story following each character on the roster and their stories as they each move where they need to be for the climax. But the scene I want to talk about is this one, Hakumen's story, Scene 5. Opening in Kagutsuchi, Hakumen finds himself a bit lost in sightseeing and, perhaps as though guided by fate, is confronted by Tsubaki Yayoi of the NOL. This is significant because by this point in the game, players should be well aware that Hakumen is an alternate version of Jin Kisaragi, whom has a deep connection with Tsubaki. We don't know much about Hakumen's timeline specifically yet, or what happened to his world Tsubaki. We get that story here as he explains how he ran off, compelled by what he felt to be a higher purpose, which we know now was the pursuit of his estranged brother, Ragna the Blood Edge. I love this scene because it makes everything we've seen up until now with Hakumen, and scenes that will follow it, so much better by adding this very personal piece to his motivation. It isn't just that he felt compelled to stop all the great evils of the world no matter the cost to himself. In fact, his original motivation for involving himself at all was actually pretty selfish. He just wanted to kill his brother. But in Hakumen's timeline, that pursuit led to the death of the person most important to him, something he only realized once she was gone. This is a trauma both he and Tsubaki share, as Hazama uses the knowledge of previous timelines against Tsubaki later to mold her hatred for Noel, who stole the position as Jin's right hand, which was originally held by Tsubaki in Hakumen's timeline. He goes on to tell Tsubaki the story of what happened to someone he held dear, keeping the details to himself so as not to let on he's talking about her. He talks about the scene we witness in the first game, Jin abandoning his post to pursue Ragna, all consequences be damned, with a single factor that changed everything for him, Tsubaki. He describes her simply as a dear friend that was always by his side, how detailed and punctual she was. When he ran off, she went after him, and got caught in the crossfire of the battle between him, Ragna, and the Murakumo unit Nu 13, of whom this particular backstory has caused me to grow a deep resentment for. She's killed right in front of Jin, whom, due to his previous battle, is completely powerless to save her. Through this, he learned the strength to fight for others, and developed the technique that bears her name. In doing so, she is always with him. He then goes on to indirectly thank her for the gifts she gave him in death, and asks for her forgiveness, and she gives it to him.
It is because of her that I was not simply another casualty of the Great War. I would tell her. I can tell her. Thank you. And if I could, I would ask her forgiveness.
I think you don't need to ask for her forgiveness, because she never blamed you for anything. I don't know what else I could say, but...
While Hakumen hasn't quite reached the point yet where he can stomach the thought of forgiving himself for his mistakes, this may very well be the domino that sets him down that path. He lets Tsubaki go, acknowledging that he has no right to stop her from doing what she feels is right, and for a moment, the mask falls, but only once they've separated.
I must go now, First Lieutenant Tsubaki. Do what you believe is right. I no longer have the right to stand in your way. Farewell, First Lieutenant Tsubaki.
Goodbye, Hakumen, sir.
Thank you, Tsubaki.
Fighting games are cool. Fighting game stories are also cool. Even when they're goofy-ass soap operas like whatever the fuck Tekken's doing. But one thing I feel is underappreciated in regards to fighting game writing, even more so than fighting game writing in general, is the art of the arcade ending. The concept is simple. Every character has an ending at the end of a run in a game's arcade mode. These endings are, usually, not canon, but they give us glimpses into the individual characters that the ending is focused on. Anyone who follows Snake stuff knows this. He's absolutely most definitely 100% talked about this kind of thing before in his various MK videos that upset people, for some reason. Some games have had a lot of fun with their arcade endings, like MVC3, which has a gaggle of humorous endings based purely on playing with these characters that they have on offer. Like She-Hulk, the baddie she is, striking fear in the hearts of Phoenix and Edgeworth from Ace Attorney to play into Jin's profession as a lawyer. I actually think crossovers are very underrated when it comes to the discussion of writing, especially with fighting games. The potential that comes from putting these characters in new environments to interact with characters they'd never meet otherwise, or scenarios they'd never encounter in their own canons. It's part of why people really like the Subspace Emissary from Brawl and why they were equally as disappointed to see it missing from following Smash games. Because seeing these characters interact in a new story was, and still is, very cool. This leads into the next section, i.e. the part that I'm talking about. And the irony is that it's not even from a game I like. Mortal Kombat 11 is, far and away, the worst NRS MK game, if you ask me. But it has the best guest fighter roster as long as you forget Joker's there. The arcade endings all see the player's chosen character getting ownership of the hourglass and thus power over all of time. This leads to some pretty good endings with the base roster, like Kano getting the hourglass and initially creating a timeline with said hourglass where he has all he ever could want. And then he gets bored with that and just starts creating new timelines where he has to struggle and fight for his goals, which, spoilers, leads into Snowblind, the best animated MK movie if you ask me. And no, I haven't seen Cage Match, so can't really speak on that one. It might be better though. But I'm not talking about any of those. I'm talking about the guest characters, which is why I brought them up earlier. And specifically, I'm talking about John Rambo. His ending is honestly brilliant, with Rambo gaining the power of the hourglass. He originally considers righting the wrongs of the world, of history, of everything, before he then realizes that deciding who lives and dies, controlling everyone's fate for all of eternity, it wasn't right, and it wasn't right for him either. It would destroy his soul, as he puts it. He states that in his mind, it'd make him no better than the old men who sent him and the others to war without any regard for what would happen to any of them. So, what does he do? Well, the most in-character thing that John Rambo could do. He gives it up. He makes the choice to walk away, not just from the power, but from fighting as well, stating that after all he's been through, all that pain and suffering and anguish and violence, he's earned peace. And he's absolutely right. I'm honestly floored how MK11, of all things, has a better understanding of what the original Rambo and its titular protagonist were all about than, like, all of the Rambo sequels. He's a victim of war, someone who was sent to fight in a war for other people's benefit without ever actually believing in that war, only to return to a world that just did not care about him or people like him. Just like the uncaring pricks who sent them to fight in the first place. This ending shows an excellent understanding of that original source material, something I doubt many people would expect from the Smash Bros. If your dad picks the fighters that is Mortal Kombat 11. It's also such a, honestly, kind of touching ending, especially since so many of the other characters actually do take advantage of the power and use it for their own desires, good intentioned or not. So to have an ending where a character decides not to do that says a lot about the character in question. Anyway, I'm pretty sure I've used up my time limit at this point, so sorry if I ran a bit long. You should see the videos on my channel. Running on for a bit long is what I do for a living.
What's up, combatants? Steve here. You may know me as MK Temple. First and foremost, I am so grateful to have been asked to participate on this video collaboration, so a huge shout out to the Fourth Snake for including me. And so let's get right to it. The biggest moments in video game story history. It's really hard for me to just pick one, so I'm actually gonna pick two. Gonna have to go with the opening cinematic for Mortal Kombat Deception. So I've been a Mortal Kombat fan for my entire life, ever since the beginning, but when that came out, I was a teenager. I had just gotten into Mortal Kombat lore with Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. Back then, everyone thought that Kung Lao was going to be the victor of Deadly Alliance. The good guys were going to come out on top. And when the trailer dropped for Deception, and it was basically that opening cinematic that the Deadly Alliance had won, there was so much build up to that point. It was a whole new storyline that no one was expecting. It turned out to be one of, if not the greatest Mortal Kombat game ever. I remember watching that as a teenager and my mind exploding. I couldn't wait. And Deception was just incredible. So number one has to be the opening cinematic for Deception. It still holds up today. I think it's fantastic. I don't think it's ever hit that peak in terms of Mortal Kombat story. Number two is actually not a story moment, but more a story beat. That is the Mortal Kombat Civil War that takes place during Mortal Kombat X. I'm kind of tired of all of this extremely high stakes. The world is going to end, the universe, multiverse, all of existence is going to end if we don't stop something. It's been going on for far too long. I am sick of it. I really loved the more intimate, small stakes setting of this Outworld civil war that was going on between Kotal Khan and Melina and their forces. And I thought the game would have been much more interesting, or at least the story would have been much more interesting if they kind of just zeroed in on this and focused on that, rather than that just being kind of a subplot of the story. So those are my two. Again, huge thank you for the Fourth Snake for including me in this video. If you like to learn more about Mortal Kombat lore and story, then I invite you over to my channel, MK Temple. Thanks again.
Hey, it's the MK Warehouse guy. A fighting game related scene that matters to me, that I enjoyed, is the pyramid fight scene from MK1. Okay, I know it sucks. I know it's stupid, it's silly, but that's why I like it. Hear me out. I mean, I think everything's been said about the story in MK1. How they tricked people into thinking we're gonna go to a new timeline, gonna start new, nothing from the past, everything's new. Then on the second half, they just went back, timeline stuff, multiverse, and I think a lot of people tune out of that. Me too. But I think they want me back with the pyramid stuff. Even though it's kinda weird that they started like super serious and a new universe, trying to set a new table in a way. When they did the pyramid fight scene, it's like they just said screw it, we're just gonna do this silly stuff. We want our third act MCU big fight scene. We made a system where we can have a mashup of characters, like Scorpion mixed up with Quan Chi. The tiny reason why I like it so much, well, because it's silly and it's so funny to see the different matchups that you get, and you can get different ones, something that I didn't know the first time I played that. But I like it because they kind of acknowledge what the community has done in a similar way to Doom 2016, when they acknowledge that Doomguy has been in all the custom maps that Doomguy has been in. They're like canon, and this is similar. Fans have always done like custom characters, mixing up, I don't know, Kitana with Sub-Zero and stuff, and now they went and did it. It's pretty impressive. I think it's a pretty impressive amount of work to make all those custom characters. I wish they could make them playable and take the same way of thinking, not taking themselves too seriously and just going with it and applying it to the rest of the game. And yeah, I mean, it's bad that they did a 180 with the timeline stuff, and then this fight scene, this whole thing leading up to the end, it was so funny to me. It was so important, and I think I like it. I would like more on that. I don't know if they're gonna do something like that, taking themselves less seriously than before, but I would like to see that. Anyway, that's it. Oh, that sucked.
NetherRealm Studios has the best storytelling in all fighting games, richly developed characters, breathtaking emotional stories, and a collection of stunning cinematic moments. NRS has been light years ahead of every other fighting game series in terms of story. That was a random comment I read on Reddit, but in my opinion, I think NRS story modes range from meh to shit. Bad writing, stupid characters, dumbass plot line, lame jobber villains, terrible mainline villains, retcons, restart, time travel, multiverse. You get the point. I've dedicated an entire channel to making fun of their story modes. But Sonic, I hear you ask, blushingly, why do you follow NRS games if you hate them so much? Do you get some sort of sick satisfaction by talking them? First off, how dare you? And second, this might shock some of you. The reason why I still follow NetherRealm Studios cinematic story modes is because I believe in them. I believe the team can write a good story, and that belief comes from the fact that they did it once. And the game I'll be talking about today is Injustice 2. More specifically, I'm going to be talking about the ending, and why I think this is the best moment NRS has ever made. The Injustice series is basically DC's attempt on Marvel's Civil War. Superman wants absolute power to control everyone, and Batman wants freedom for the people. This conflict comes to a halt when Brainiac shows up, and the two sides are forced to work together. After some confrontation, they finally defeat Brainiac. When I first played this, I really thought this was going to be the ending. Every NRS ending has been good versus evil, and it felt like that was what they were doing here too. The Justice League versus Brainiac, it really felt like they were back to their old selves when Batman and Superman were working together.
To see you working together again, you must keep order.
I thought the ending was either going to be how they kiss and make up, or they give each other a nod and go their separate ways. But the moment the conflict is absolved, the moment where save the world is out of the equation, they instantly go back to square one, back to their puny conflict. This ending is not about good versus evil. It's about who's right, true justice, or forced justice. And you, the player, get to decide. The messy brawl between friends and foes begins. Some don't want to fight. They just save the world. How could they start fighting with each other? While others are prepared to take back power and are ready to do what's necessary. Depending on which side you choose, you would get a different perspective and different characters to fight. That's really ballsy from NRS.
Ballsy?
Unless you replay the chapter to get the other ending, you will miss out around 10 minutes of cutscenes. I think that's really cool. In the end, Kara tries to plead with Kal one last time, and Batman defeats the devil on Superman's shoulder. Then we get perhaps the most emotional scene NRS has ever done.
Fighting on the same side, it felt like old times.
Do you remember that night when you told me Lois was pregnant?
You knew, even before I said anything.
That was a good memory.
Before the ceaseless fighting, before the Civil War, before the injustice among gods, they were comrades, they were friends, they were heroes.
I miss the people we were then.
Me too.
And then boom, right back to enemies. And now we get to the endings. If Batman wins, he'll send Superman to the Phantom Zone, then offer Supergirl to join the Justice League. If Superman wins, he'll reinstate the regime and take over the world again, while building a new army with Brainiac's tech. And the final stinger, if you don't comply with him, he'll force you to. I think the best thing about both of these endings is that no one knows which one is the canon ending. While the Batman one is considered the good ending, the Superman ending leads to so many interesting directions for the franchise to go. And that's about all I've got to gush about. The final conflict changing from Brainiac to themselves. Different perspectives depending on who you choose. One last emotional confrontation. Two endings that drastically change the narrative. And I still think NRS has not even come close to making something as epic as this. I can't really say if the Injustice series was good or not, but this ending made me feel like Injustice 2 had a good story mode.
And that's
why I still follow NetherRealm Studios.
That's
why I believe they can make a good story mode again. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to run now. I've been complimenting the Injustice series a little too much in this video. Oh no, the haters have found me. Ciao 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 ciao.
Hey, what's going on guys? This is Tapmock99. Now I've been invited here to talk to you guys about my favorite scene from a fighting game or fighting game adaptation. Now for me, this has to be one that goes all the way back to the first Mortal Kombat game, where the characters all got together on a boat before they got together for the fight of their lives.
A handful of people on a leaky boat are gonna save the world.
Exactly.
Now this is a scene we've seen play out over and over and over again, just not in the actual games.
In the Mortal Kombat comic published by Midway, the arcade tie-in, the boat is actually a pretty significant part of the story. This is how the fighters get from their everyday lives onto Shang Tsung's island. So in the process, this is where characters like Johnny Cage, Kano, and Liu Kang encounter each other for the first time. This is also where Scorpion confronts Sub-Zero for the first time after his death. And Sonya didn't even make it onto the boat. Instead, she and her Special Forces team took a speeder and followed the boat back to Shang Tsung's island. In the Malibu comic series, Mortal Kombat Blood and Thunder, the boat is also a pretty significant part of the story. In fact, issue number 1 is even titled A Slow Boat to China, which, it turns out, is a reference to a 1940s song by Bing Crosby.
Not that this video is about me making song references or anything. Anyway, in other scenes, it plays out a little differently.
In the Mortal Kombat movie, the 1995 version, which is probably the most well-known, Sonya absolutely makes it onto the boat, even though doing so means violating a direct order from her commanding officer.
Sonya, don't get on that thing. Hey, Sonya!
In Mortal Kombat The Journey Begins, practically the entire movie takes place on the boat. Most of the dialogue, the exposition, and flashbacks take place while the characters are out to sea.
Seasick, huh? What gave it away? Was it my green skin tone or my delightful odor?
There's another animated adaptation, Mortal Kombat Legends: Scorpion's Revenge. Personally, my favorite part about this is where Johnny Cage complains how his phone gets no service out in the water. The title character, Scorpion, doesn't actually make it onto Shang Tsung's boat. He takes a different one, presumably sent by Quan Chi.
Now, despite these differences in how it actually works, at least we get to see it. In Mortal Kombat 9, they skip over it completely.
In the current generation, we really aren't seeing anything with the boat. You might even say, they don't give a shit. When NetherRealm Studios rebooted the franchise with Mortal Kombat 9, the opening scene shows the fighters having already arrived on the island. In Mortal Kombat Legacy, the fighters were teleported straight to the island from wherever they were, bypassing the need for boat transportation altogether. Here's a fun fact. The original name of the boat was the Dragon Wing, as shown in the Mortal Kombat action figure series by Hasbro. That was also the name they used in the movie. Well, not in the movie itself, but in tie-ins like the novelizations and the trading card series. In Mortal Kombat Deception, the boat would be renamed to the Nether Ship, which always seemed a bit off to me, because it makes it sound like the ship has something to do with the Nether Realm, which it doesn't.
But regardless of what you call it, that's my favorite scene. The time when all the characters get together for one big party on a boat.
Now, there have been other scenes in Mortal Kombat's history that also take place on boats. And those scenes are cool too, but they're not quite this.
Well, thanks again to Fourth Snake for inviting me to be part of this video, and thanks to you guys for watching. Until next time, this is Tabdoc99 saying, anchors away until we set sail again.
How's it going, everyone? My name is TrueUnderdawg, and I believe a truly emotional ending will stick with you forever, which is why Soul Calibur 5 holds a special place in my heart. Not only does this game flip the plot on its head, but it ends the conflict in such a heartfelt way. Many players consider this game the black sheep of the series, but I think it's beautiful. But okay, on to my favorite scene. For the entire series, we've been told that Soul Calibur is good and Soul Edge is evil, which definitely appears true if you look at the wielders. I mean, look at this guy on the right, he's definitely the evil one. So then tell me, why is Soul Calibur trying to force Patroclus, our main hero, to kill his unconscious sister? He just wants to destroy the evil sword, but that's not enough for Soul Calibur. It demands complete obliteration. Now, Patroclus does manage to resist and even toss Soul Edge away from his sister, but this act of defiance freezes him solid. And now the spirit of Soul Calibur forcibly enters his mind and vows to take control of his body to kill Soul Edge and his sister. And it's saying all of this while disguised as his dead mother. Yeah, it turns out Soul Calibur can be manipulative too. It's never been about good versus evil, these weapons just want to destroy each other. Soul Edge uses hatred to control you, while Soul Calibur controls you with false virtue. Killing your sister is the righteous thing to do, boy. You can trust me, I'm an angel. This reveal that both weapons are heartless and manipulative was awesome. Patroclus' sister Pyrrha wakes up while he's still frozen, and feeling guilty about her actions, she vows to free him from the ice by using Soul Edge. edge, and normally just touching this weapon would cause it to possess you, but because Pyrrha only feels love in this moment, the sword gets neutralized. Since there's no hate in her body, the sword can't do anything. I love this scene, it's so beautiful. Patroclus defeats the spirit of Soul Calibur, Pyrrha frees him from the ice, the two of them share a cute moment together, and then they destroy both swords with the power of love. Though it's interesting to see our heroes use Soul Edge to end the conflict, since that's the opposite of how you'd expect this story of good versus evil to end. But in reality, this story was about peace versus war, so weapons alone could never succeed. You needed humanity. I think that's really cool, and the idea of the final battle in a fighting game series being spiritual and not just physical is really neat. So yeah, that's my favorite scene from a fighting game story. It's got heart, a big reveal, and a solid resolution. Really good stuff.
So, I've got a couple of moments in fighting games that mean a lot to me in the story modes, and one of them, of course, will relate to my favorite character in Mortal Kombat, Rain. During the 3D era, I remember searching high and low for any sign of being able to play Rain in Deception, and the only way that you could actually interact with him was a little sort of quest line, sort of two-parter, where he sent you to find a Shokan ceremonial dagger, and then later on when he was ambushed by Jade with your help as Shujinko. So, in that game, I searched high and low, could not find any way to play Rain. But then he turns up in Mortal Kombat Armageddon Story, and this, after all these years, since I loved him throughout the MK3 era, he is finally playable, but not only that, his story actually evolves. Firstly, he gets the ceremonial dagger, it's part of his outfit, his design. And then on top of that, we finally get some elaboration as to who he is as a character. It turns out he is a direct descendant of Argus. He is a demigod, and he is trying to take revenge on his father, I suppose, for just leaving him in the dust while focusing on his half-brothers, Taven and Dagon. You end up fighting Rain as Taven, and of course beating him. After that, he disappears into a watery portal. Typical sort of Rain thing, and it makes sense with the conquest mode of Armageddon. But it's actually cool, because after all this time, he's playable, and his character has gained so much growth. He's so cool, and of course they fit in the whole Purple Rain Prince thing. Then, this is my cheating, I'm going with two scenes, we get to MKX. You know, it's been a while already since we've actually gotten much elaboration on his story. We got him as a DLC in MK9, but he turns up in MKX, which sadly he's not playable, but he comes in with an amazing design and the coolest voice, right? It sounds so, I don't know, ethereal, watery, bubbly. I don't know how you want to go with it. But he turns up and he's actually a major player in the story, and it's just so cool to actually see how his character has evolved, and he's obviously manipulating Melina, trying to get her to use the Amulet of Shinnok, and he's using all these moves and such, and it's just, he's finally here, he's finally made it as a character, you know? Like, it's just beautiful to see, and that really meant so much to me as a Rain fan over all these years, that he finally got that sort of focus. It was beautiful for me. So, those are my two scenes.
And now, we'll close off this collaboration with my personal pick. Ayane isn't exactly one of my favourite characters in Dead or Alive. She's the rival to the protagonist Kasumi, spending most of the early series trying to kill her half-sister over petty ninja laws and generally being irritable and unpleasant. Her reasons are understandable even if we disagree with them. She was mistreated by her clan all her life due to the, let's just say, unpleasant circumstances that led to her birth. But she's the daughter of the clan head's wife and the younger sister of her childhood best friend Kasumi and the older brother both girls look up to, Hayate. And that she was treated like dirt while her siblings were treated like royalty bred resentment within her. The only people in the clan who treated Ayane well were Kasumi, Hayate, and Genra. Genra led the sect of the clan that dealt with assassinations. He took her in and taught her his fighting style. It was a crucial relationship for her to develop at a time when she was starting to hate Kasumi and was separated from Hayate. It was just about the only positive relationship she had left. In Dead or Alive 3, Genra is abducted and brainwashed by Doatek in yet another scheme to create the ultimate ninja soldier. Ayane accompanies Hayate to compete in the tournament to cut down Genra, knowing there is no way to save him. This tournament sees two new things from Ayane. First, while she fights Kasumi and canonically beats her for the first and only time, she does not kill her. She lets her sister go and see Hayate, choosing to prioritize Genra. Any other day, she would absolutely try to kill her, but she has something more important to deal with right now. Second, she disobeys Hayate, who is now the head of the clan, and thus sees this as his responsibility. Ayane actually fights Hayate over this. The only other time they ever fought was when he had amnesia, such is the respect and trust the two have for one another. And despite knowing Hayate as her brother, Ayane's feelings towards Hayate are hinted to be somewhat romantic, which goes to show the conviction she now feels as she knocks him out so that she can fight Genra. And even though it's presented in a quick wide shot, the anguish she feels for having done this as she silently turns and walks away afterwards is palpable. In fact, the prototype version of the scene even depicted Ayane actually starting the fight. This clash with her foster father is made all the more important because in the first game, the final boss was her evil biological father, who crippled Hayate and whose presence led to Kasumi leaving the clan to avenge him, setting her and Ayane's rivalry fully into motion. She wasn't able to avenge Hayate and protect the clan's secrets back then, having to rely on Kasumi to do so. But now, with her foster father, the one she doesn't actually want to kill but knows she must, Ayane defeats him in the climax, ending the threat he poses to her clan and relieving the burden from Hayate's shoulders. Her ending depicts her burning her father's body, tearfully leaving him behind as she moves forward into this new era of her life without him. This is a whole new side to Ayane we hadn't seen before, and while the backstory wasn't fully revealed until DOA 2 Ultimate, it all still comes together to strengthen Ayane's character, turning her from a fairly shallow rival that Kasumi is contractually obligated to fight in every game, into a real character with a tragic history, earning her a lot of sympathy and understanding from the player. Ayane then carries Genra's mask on her belt throughout DOA 4, the game where, fittingly, she finally puts an end to her rivalry with Kasumi and starts to become more willing to work together. It's likely that killing Genra made her reflect on her remaining relationships, as few as they are, and reconsider whether or not it was worth losing more family. After all, she's already openly defied her clan once by standing up to Hayate, so why not do it a second time so that she never has to kill her family again? So you can see why DOA Dimension's retcon of these events and the motivations behind them infuriated me so much. But you can watch this video if you're curious about that. I'd like to thank everyone who took part in this project and link you to a video of each of theirs in a playlist at the end of this video. Story matters. Character matters. For many players, it's the personality and narrative of a character that draws them in before gameplay ever does. It doesn't matter what some fans think the game's priorities are, the story is there and players are drawn to it. It informs the roster choices, the stages, the marketing. So much of a new entry is influenced, if not outright dictated, by the story. People don't draw their favourite characters, cosplay their favourite characters, make them in other games, write 80+ chapters of fanfiction about them because they like how they play. It's their personalities and designs, their histories and developments, how they change the setting and how the setting changes them. That's what draws us in and keeps us thinking about the fighters and coming back each new entry to see what new is happening with them. That's why it's so tragic that something new is so rare to see now. Most fighting games have settled into a groove where they're afraid to change things or leave out certain characters, even if they're dead, because the gameplay people get priority and the rest of us are just left watching the same old rivalries and the same old bad guys holding back the whole world's progression for 20+ years. Those of us who appreciate the story and the characters need to make our voices heard, express our love for these plots and character arcs so that the developers and publishers know that it's okay for them to shake things up, to try new things and to move the story forward, even if some players won't have their mains for an entry or two. I don't want these franchises to just have the great story moments we already have, then recycle or reimagine them from then on. I want new great story moments. I want to see the next chapter in the Armor King soap opera. I want to see Bihan's redemption. I want to see Kasumi get to come home. I want to see a world without Shadaloo. And above all, I want to see Roger's family reconcile so bad after the cuckoldry you don't even know. If you liked this video, why not subscribe and support me on Patreon like these fine people here? If not, then go check out the playlist of videos by these other creators because they are awesome.